You've been taught that the past is set in stone, that what happened yesterday can't be changed today, and that memories are fixed recordings of events that occurred exactly as you remember them. But what if everything you've been told about time, memory, and reality is a complete lie? What if I told you that you can literally change your past, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but actually alter the events that already happened, and by doing so, transform your present and future in ways that seem like magic, but are actually based on profound spiritual law? Neville Goddard discovered a technique so powerful, so controversial, that most people dismiss it as impossible before even trying it. Yet those who've applied it consistently report life changes so dramatic that they can't explain them to friends and family without sounding insane. This isn't about positive thinking. This isn't about letting go of the past. This is about going back into your memories and rewriting them, literally changing what happened and watching your current reality shift to match the new past you've created. If you're suffering from past trauma, if you're haunted by regrets, if there's an event in your history that you replay over and over, wishing it had gone differently, then the next few minutes will either transform your life or challenge everything you believe about how reality works. And honestly, you're not ready for what I'm about to reveal. Revision is Neville Goddard's technique for literally rewriting past events in your imagination. And when I say rewriting, I don't mean accepting them or reframing them. I mean going back into the memory and changing what actually happened, seeing it unfold differently, and through the power of imagination, impressing a new version onto your subconscious until that becomes the memory you carry forward. Most people think this is insane because we've been conditioned to believe that the past is immutable, that time flows in one direction, that what's done is done. But Neville discovered through decades of testing that your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a memory of something that happened and a vividly imagined alternative version, and whichever version you feed it more consistently becomes the operational past that shapes your present. This isn't about lying to yourself. It's about understanding that your memory of an event isn't the event itself. It's a mental construct, a story you tell yourself. And that story is running in the background of your mind right now, creating emotions, beliefs, and behaviors that are shaping your current reality in ways you don't even realize. I'll give you a personal example that's going to make this concrete. 3 years ago, I had a business meeting that went horribly wrong. I said things I regretted, the client walked out, I lost a major contract, and for months afterward, I'd replay that meeting in my mind, cringing at my mistakes, feeling the shame and anger all over again. And every time I had a new business meeting, I'd carry that emotional residue with me. I'd be tense, defensive, overcompensating. Then I learned revision from Neville's lectures, and instead of trying to accept what happened or learn from it, I did something radical. Every night for 2 weeks before falling asleep, I went back to that meeting in my imagination. But this time, I saw myself speaking with confidence, saying the right things, seeing the client's face light up with interest, closing the deal, shaking hands, feeling pride and satisfaction. At first, it felt like lying, like I was deluding myself, but I persisted. And something strange started happening. The emotional charge around that memory began to dissolve. When I'd think about it, I'd remember the revised version more clearly than the original. And most shocking of all, my behavior in current meetings completely transformed. The confidence I imagined in the revision started showing up automatically in real situations. Now, here's where it gets wild, and this is what most people can't wrap their heads around. About 6 months after I'd been consistently revising that meeting, the client reached out to me completely out of the blue, said he'd been thinking about our conversation, wanted to revisit working together, and we ended up doing a deal that was 3 times bigger than the original one I'd lost. And when I think back to that first meeting now, I genuinely can't remember it the way it originally happened. The revision has become my dominant memory. Neville would say that's not coincidence. He'd say that by changing the past in imagination, I changed the vibrational frequency I was emitting, which changed how people responded to me, which created new opportunities that wouldn't have existed if I'd carried the original failure forward. And whether you believe that's metaphysics or psychology doesn't matter. What matters is it works, but only if you understand that revision isn't a one-time thing. It's a practice, a discipline, and it contradicts everything you've been taught about accepting reality, which is exactly why most people never try it and stay stuck in patterns created by pasts they think they can't change. The reason revision works is based on a premise that's gonna sound absolutely crazy. Until you really think about it, the past doesn't exist anywhere except in your mind right now. It's not stored in some cosmic filing cabinet. It's not recorded in the fabric of reality. It's a memory, a mental construct that you're recreating in this present moment. Neville taught that everything is happening now. There's only this eternal present moment, and what you call the past is just a thought you're having now about something you believe happened then, which means the past is actually fluid. It's being reconstructed every single time you remember it. And if you're reconstructing it anyway, why not reconstruct it in a way that serves you instead of sabotages you? Most people never question this because we've been conditioned by linear time perception. We think time flows like a river from past to present to future. But quantum physics is starting to suggest that time might not work the way we assume. That past, present, and future might be far more interconnected than our limited perception allows us to understand. Think about your own memories for a second. How accurate are they really? Have you ever remembered an event one way, only to have someone who was there remember it completely differently? Have you ever looked at old photos or videos and realized your memory of that day was wrong? Have you ever had a therapist or friend reframe a past experience, and suddenly you see it from a totally different angle, and it changes how you feel about it? Your memory isn't a video recording, it's a story you've constructed, and every time you access that memory, you're actually reconstructing it based on your current beliefs, emotions, and perspectives, which means it's already changing whether you're conscious of it or not. So the question isn't whether you can change the past, the question is whether you're changing it deliberately or accidentally, empowering yourself or victimizing yourself, healing yourself or re-traumatizing yourself every single time you remember. I used to think my childhood was terrible. I had memories of feeling ignored, unloved, unsupported. And I carried those memories like evidence, proving that I wasn't worthy of love. And those memories shaped my relationships for decades. I'd choose partners who ignored me. I'd feel invisible in groups. I'd self-sabotage whenever someone tried to get close. But when I started studying Neville and understanding that my memory of my childhood is just a story I'm telling myself now, not the actual childhood itself, I began to revise specific scenes. I went back to moments where I felt unloved and reimagined them with my parents being present, attentive, expressing affection. And after months of this practice, something extraordinary happened. My relationship with my still-living parents began to improve in the present. They started calling more, being more engaged, and when I'd visit them, I'd notice behaviors I swear weren't there before: warmth, interest, pride. Now, you can argue that I just started perceiving them differently, so I responded differently, so they responded differently, or you can consider Neville's teaching that by changing the past, I actually changed the timeline. And honestly, the mechanism doesn't matter as much as the result, which is that the story I tell myself about where I come from has fundamentally shifted, and that shift has rippled forward into every relationship I have today. Because the past isn't fixed. It's a living story. You're telling yourself right now, and you have the power to revise that story. Your memories aren't just neutral records of things that happened. They're active forces shaping your present reality in ways that are invisible to you until you start paying attention. Every memory you have is connected to an emotion, and that emotion is connected to a belief. And that belief is connected to a behavior, and that behavior is creating results in your life right now. If you have a memory of being rejected, you're carrying an emotional residue of shame or fear. You've developed a belief that you're not good enough or that people will hurt you, and that belief is causing you to either avoid relationships or sabotage them when they get too close. And all of this is happening automatically, unconsciously, running in the background like a computer program you didn't know was installed. Neville understood that most people are living their present moment as a reaction to their past rather than as a creation from their imagination. They're letting old stories dictate new outcomes, and they wonder why life feels like it's on repeat, why the same patterns keep showing up in different forms, why they can't seem to break free from cycles they desperately want to escape. Here's a specific example that'll make this crystal clear. Let's say you have a memory from elementary school where you raised your hand to answer a question, got the answer wrong, and the whole class laughed at you. That one event created an emotional imprint of humiliation, which created a belief that speaking up is dangerous, which created a behavior of staying quiet in groups. And now, decades later, you're in business meetings staying silent even when you have great ideas. You're watching other people get promoted while you fade into the background, and you can't figure out why you can't assert yourself. That's because you're not actually in the present moment. You're still in that elementary school classroom. That 8-year-old version of you is running your adult behavior. And every time you're in a situation where you could speak up, your subconscious pulls up that old memory as evidence that speaking up equals humiliation. So it shuts you down to protect you. Except it's not protecting you anymore. It's sabotaging you. But your subconscious doesn't know that because it's still operating from outdated data. This is where revision becomes life-changing. If you go back to that elementary school memory and revise it, imagine yourself raising your hand, giving the right answer, hearing the teacher praise you, seeing your classmates look at you with respect, feeling proud and confident. And you do this vividly enough that your subconscious accepts this new version as the memory. Then the emotional imprint changes from humiliation to confidence. The belief changes from speaking is dangerous to speaking, brings respect, and the behavior changes from staying silent to speaking up. And suddenly, in your next business meeting, you find yourself sharing ideas without that old fear. And people respond positively, and opportunities start opening up that were always there, but you couldn't access because your past was blocking you. Your memories are literally the lens through which you see and interact with the present. And if that lens is distorted by painful or limiting past experiences, your present will be distorted too. But revision allows you to clean that lens, to change the prescription, to see and experience reality from a completely different vantage point. And when your perception changes, your reality must change, because reality is perception. That's the core of Neville's teaching. And the reason revision is so powerful. The biggest mistake people make with their past, and this is what keeps them imprisoned in patterns they hate, is they keep reliving it. They keep going back to painful memories and experiencing them over and over, feeling the same emotions, reinforcing the same beliefs, and they think they're just remembering. But what they're actually doing is recreating. They're taking that past event and bringing it into the present moment with full emotional force, which means they're not moving forward. They're standing still in a moment that only exists in their imagination. Every time you replay a trauma, a failure, a rejection, a humiliation, you're not just remembering it, you're literally doing it again. You're putting your body through the same stress response, flooding your system with the same chemicals, activating the same neural pathways. And your subconscious doesn't know the difference between something happening now and you vividly remembering something that happened then. So it treats every replay as a new occurrence of the same event, which means you're traumatizing yourself repeatedly, and the more you do it, the deeper that groove becomes in your psyche. I see this all the time with people who've been hurt in relationships. They'll tell me about their ex who betrayed them 5 years ago, and as they're telling me the story, I can see their body language change. Their face tightens, their voice gets strained, their breathing gets shallow. They're literally experiencing that betrayal right now, in this moment, as they describe it. And they're doing this multiple times a day. Every time they think about it, every time they tell someone the story, every time something reminds them of it, they're reliving it, refeeling it, re-traumatizing themselves, and then they wonder why they can't move on, why they can't trust new partners, why every relationship feels like it's heading toward the same ending. It's because they haven't left that old relationship. They're still in it. They're still experiencing it every single day. And their current partner doesn't stand a chance because they're competing with a ghost that's being kept alive through constant replay. And this isn't about forgiveness or letting go. This is about understanding that you're actively choosing to re-experience something painful when you could be choosing to revise it. The fatal error is thinking that your past needs to be accepted as it is, that you need to make peace with what happened, that you need to learn lessons from your pain and move forward with wisdom gained through suffering. And while there's some truth to that, Neville offers a radically different approach. He says, why carry the scar when you can change the wound? Why accept a limiting past when you can revise it into an empowering one? Why let old events define you when you have the power, through imagination, to redefine those events? Most people won't do this because they're attached to their victimhood. Their pain has become part of their identity. Their story of what they've been through gives them sympathy and attention. It excuses their current failures. It explains why they're not where they want to be. And to revise the past would mean losing that story, taking full responsibility for their present. And that's terrifying. It's easier to blame your parents, your ex, your circumstances, your bad luck, than to admit that you're choosing every moment to relive and reinforce the past that's keeping you stuck. But once you understand this error, once you see how you're the one keeping your past alive through constant replay, you can make a different choice. You can choose revision, and that choice changes everything. Let me walk you through exactly how to do revision the way Neville taught it, because if you get this wrong, it won't work. And most people who try revision and say it didn't work made mistakes in the process that prevented their subconscious from accepting the new version as the memory. Step 1 is to identify a specific event you want to revise. Don't be vague. Don't say, I want to revise my childhood. Pick one specific scene, one specific conversation, one specific moment that you know is still affecting you. The more specific, the better, because your subconscious works with images, not abstractions. Step 2 is to get into a relaxed state. Neville always recommended doing this right before sleep, because that's when your subconscious is most receptive. You're in that drowsy state between waking and sleeping, where the critical conscious mind is quiet and the subconscious is open. Lie down, close your eyes, take some deep breaths, and let your body relax until you feel that nice heavy feeling like you're sinking into the bed. This state is crucial because revision done from a tense analytical state won't penetrate deep enough to overwrite the original memory. Step 3 is to replay the event as it actually happened. But here's the key. You're not trying to feel it. You're just observing it like you're watching a movie. You see the scene unfold. You see yourself in it. You notice what was said and done. But you're detached. You're not reliving it emotionally. You're just reviewing it, so you know what needs to be changed. Step 4 is where the magic happens. You now revise the scene. You go back to the beginning and you see it unfold differently. You see yourself saying different things, doing different things. You see other people responding differently. You see the outcome you wish had happened actually happening. And this is where most people mess up. They do this half-heartedly. They imagine it weakly, while part of their mind is saying, "This isn't real, this didn't happen." And that doubt kills the effectiveness. You have to imagine it with the same vividness you'd imagine anything else. You have to see the details, hear the sounds, feel the emotions of the revised version. You have to make it so real in your imagination that it feels more real than the memory of what actually happened. Step 5 is repetition. You don't just do this once and you're done. You do it every night before sleep. You revise the same scene the same way until the new version becomes more dominant in your mind than the old version, and you'll know it's working when you try to remember the original event, and you have to actually try to remember it. When the revised version comes to mind first and feels more true, that's when you know your subconscious has accepted it as the memory. Neville would do revisions for weeks or even months on the same event until he couldn't remember it any other way. And that's the level of commitment required if you want real transformation. Not just feeling a little better about the past, but actually changing the past in your consciousness so thoroughly that your present automatically reflects that change. I revised a fight I had with my father for 30 nights straight. Every night before sleep, I'd see that conversation happening differently. I'd see him listening to me, understanding me, us hugging at the end, feeling love instead of anger. And by night 30, I genuinely couldn't remember what we actually fought about. The revised version had become my memory, and within 2 months, my relationship with my father in present time had completely transformed in ways I can't logically explain, except to say that revision works if you work it. But you have to follow the process exactly as Neville laid it out. No shortcuts, no half measures, full commitment to seeing your past differently until the new version becomes truth. One of the biggest objections people have to revision is that it seems like denial, like you're lying to yourself, pretending something didn't happen when it did. And they worry that by revising trauma, they're invalidating their own experience or gaslighting themselves into believing a false reality. But this completely misunderstands what revision is and how memory actually works. You're not denying that something happened. You're acknowledging that what happened exists only as a memory in your mind right now. And that memory is not the event itself. It's your interpretation of the event, your emotional response to it, the story you've constructed around it. And that story is changeable because it's not made of physical matter. It's made of thought and imagination. Revision isn't about pretending trauma didn't happen. It's about refusing to let that trauma continue happening every time you remember it. It's about taking your power back from a past that's been controlling your present. And there's nothing weak or delusional about that. In fact, it takes more courage to revise trauma than to just accept it and live as a victim of it. Think about therapy. Good therapy doesn't just have you talk about trauma over and over, reliving it. Good therapy helps you reframe it, see it from different angles, understand that the meaning you gave it might not be the only meaning possible, and that reframing changes how you feel about it, which changes how it affects your present. And that's similar to revision, except revision goes deeper because you're not just reframing intellectually. You're actually re-experiencing it imaginatively, with a different outcome. If someone was abused as a child, revision isn't about imagining the abuse didn't happen. It's about going back to specific scenes and imagining a different response. Maybe imagining adult you stepping into the scene and protecting child you. Or imagining the abuser being stopped. Or imagining yourself finding safety and support immediately after. The goal is to remove the feeling of helplessness and replace it with a feeling of power, protection, and resolution. Because that helpless feeling is what's been driving your behavior ever since. And if you can change that feeling through imagination, you change the effects of the trauma, without erasing the fact that it happened. I worked with someone who'd been in a car accident. Every time she drove, she'd have panic attacks. She'd relive the moment of impact, feel the terror, and it was ruining her life. She couldn't work, couldn't take her kids to school. She was becoming a prisoner in her own home. I taught her revision, and every night she'd go back to that accident. But instead of reliving the crash, she'd imagine the car stopping in time, imagine herself staying calm, imagine getting home safely. And after 3 weeks of this, her panic attacks stopped. She could drive again, and she told me something fascinating, she said. When she thinks about that day now, she remembers being scared, but she also remembers being okay. Like both realities exist in her mind simultaneously. And the one that feels more true is the revised one where she was safe. That's not denial. That's healing. That's taking a memory that was traumatizing her every single day and transforming it into a memory that no longer has power over her. And if you think that's fake or wrong, ask yourself, what's more fake? Choosing to imagine yourself as safe and empowered, or continuing to imagine yourself as damaged and helpless? Because either way, you're using imagination. The question is just whether you're using it to imprison yourself or free yourself. A lot of people confuse revision with regular visualization or manifestation techniques, but they're fundamentally different in their purpose and their mechanics. And if you don't understand the difference, you'll use revision wrong and get frustrated when it doesn't work. Visualization is about imagining something you want in the future. You see yourself achieving a goal, having the relationship you desire, living in the house you dream about. And the purpose is to impress that future reality onto your subconscious so it starts guiding you toward it. You're creating a new future. Revision, on the other hand, is about changing something that already happened in the past. You're going backwards in time imaginatively, finding a specific event that occurred, and rewriting how it unfolded. The purpose isn't to create a new future. It's to change the past so that your present automatically changes because your present is shaped by your past. And if you change the foundation, the structure built on that foundation must change too. The mechanics are different as well. With visualization, you're usually imagining from a first-person perspective in the present tense. You're seeing through your own eyes, feeling as if it's happening now. You're trying to generate the emotion of having what you want, so that emotion becomes your dominant frequency. With revision, you're often imagining from a third-person perspective, like watching a movie. You see yourself in the scene. You're more detached, less emotionally involved in the moment. You're calmly observing the scene unfold differently than it did. And the goal isn't to generate emotion as much as it is to impress a new sequence of events onto your subconscious memory bank. You're literally overwriting a file, replacing version 1.0 with version 2.0, and emotion comes later when that new version becomes your dominant memory and changes how you feel in present situations that used to trigger the old memory. Here's a practical example. Let's say you want a promotion at work. Visualization would have you imagining receiving the promotion, feeling the excitement, seeing your new title, maybe imagining your first day in the new role. And you do this to align your energy with that reality so you naturally take actions and attract opportunities that lead to the promotion. Revision would be used if there's a past event blocking you from that promotion. Maybe you bombed a presentation 2 years ago, and ever since you've felt like management sees you as incompetent. So you'd revise that presentation, you'd go back in imagination and see yourself nailing it. See the management team nodding in approval. Feel confident and proud. And you do this not to create the promotion directly, but to remove the energetic block created by that failed presentation, to change the story. Your subconscious is telling you about your competence, and once that story changes, your behavior changes, your confidence changes, and the promotion becomes natural rather than something you're straining to manifest. Both techniques are powerful, but they're used for different purposes. and Neville taught that often before you can successfully manifest a new future, you need to revise your past so you're not carrying baggage that contradicts what you're trying to create. You clean up the past first, then the future becomes easier to shape. Let me share some real examples of revision in action, because hearing how it's worked for others will help you believe it can work for you. These aren't made-up stories. These are documented cases from Neville's students and people I've personally worked with who applied this technique with full commitment and saw results that changed their lives. Neville himself talks about a woman who came to his lectures suffering from guilt over how she'd treated her mother before her mother died. Every day she'd replay their last conversations, all the harsh things she'd said, all the love she'd failed to express, and this guilt was destroying her. She couldn't sleep, couldn't function. She was literally making herself sick with regret. Neville taught her revision, told her to go back to those final conversations every night and revise them, to imagine herself speaking with kindness, expressing love, seeing her mother smile and feel appreciated. And the woman did this faithfully for several weeks, and gradually the guilt dissolved. The memories that had been torturing her were replaced with memories of love and connection. And even though her mother was gone, the woman's relationship with that loss completely transformed. She found peace where there had been only pain. Another case involved a man who'd lost a significant amount of money in a bad business deal. He'd trusted someone who betrayed him. And not only was he dealing with the financial loss, but he was carrying anger, resentment, and a feeling of being stupid for having trusted in the first place. And this was affecting every business decision he made going forward. He'd become paranoid, unable to trust anyone, turning down opportunities because he was afraid of being burned again. He started revising that business deal. Every night he'd go back to the moment he signed the contract. But in revision, he'd imagine himself noticing red flags, asking better questions, ultimately walking away from the deal. And sometimes he'd revise it so the other person was honest and the deal went well. He experimented with different versions, but the key was he stopped replaying the version where he was the victim and the fool. And within a few months, his whole energy around business changed. He stopped being paranoid, started trusting his judgment again, took a new opportunity that came along, and ended up making back everything he'd lost, and more. And when I asked him about the original deal, he said he honestly doesn't think about it anymore. It's like it happened to a different person. I personally used revision to transform a romantic relationship that ended badly. My ex and I had a final conversation that was full of blame, anger, things said that couldn't be unsaid. And for a year afterward, I carried that conversation with me. I'd replay it constantly, feel the anger and hurt every time. And it was preventing me from opening up to new relationships because I was still energetically tied to that ending. So I revised it every single night for 2 months. I went back to that final conversation, and I saw it happening with love instead of anger. I saw us both acknowledging what went wrong without blame, expressing gratitude for what we'd shared, wishing each other well, hugging goodbye, and I felt peace and closure. And I did this so consistently that the revised version became more real to me than what actually happened, and something extraordinary occurred. About 3 months later, my ex reached out. We had an actual conversation almost identical to the one I'd been imagining. We found that closure in reality that I'd created in imagination. And whether you think that's coincidence or manifestation or timeline shifting doesn't matter. What matters is the emotional bondage I'd been in for a year was completely released, and I was free to move forward. And that freedom came from revision, from refusing to keep the old story alive, and choosing to imagine a better ending until that became my truth. Revision has a particularly powerful effect on relationships because so much of how we relate to others in the present is determined by how past relationships unfolded. If you had parents who were critical, you'll unconsciously expect criticism from authority figures. If you had a partner who cheated, you'll unconsciously expect betrayal from new partners. If you had friends who abandoned you, you'll unconsciously keep people at arm's length to protect yourself from future abandonment, and all of this is running automatically based on past relational memories that are shaping your current relational reality. When you revise past relationships, you're not trying to change the other person. You're changing your memory of your interactions with them, which changes the beliefs you formed about relationships in general, which changes how you show up in relationships now, and often, mysteriously, it even seems to change how those same people treat you in present time if they're still in your life. And while that might sound impossible, Neville would say it's perfectly logical because there are no others. Everyone in your life is a reflection of your own consciousness. So when you change your consciousness about them, they must change in your experience. Let's get practical with this. Say you have a strained relationship with a sibling. Every family gathering is tense because of things said years ago that neither of you have addressed. You replay old arguments, old resentments, and every time you interact, it's colored by this history. You can't just be in the present moment with them. You're always seeing them through the lens of past hurt. Revision gives you a way out of this. You pick specific arguments or incidents that you know are still affecting you, and you revise them one by one. You go back to that Christmas dinner where the blow-up happened, and instead of replaying the fight, you imagine the conversation going differently. You see yourself staying calm. You see your sibling being receptive. You see both of you reaching understanding, maybe hugging it out. And you do this with enough vividness and repetition that this becomes your dominant memory of that event. And I guarantee you, the next time you see that sibling, something will be different. Maybe they'll be warmer. Maybe you'll feel less defensive. Maybe a conversation will happen that's been needed for years, and it'll seem like they changed. But really, you changed your memory of them, which changed your energy toward them, which changed their response to you. I've seen this work with romantic relationships in fascinating ways. People will revise breakups or fights from years ago with ex-partners they haven't spoken to in ages. And suddenly, the ex will reach out, or they'll run into each other unexpectedly and have a completely different interaction than would have been possible before the revision. And I've also seen it work where people revise relationships with deceased parents. They go back and revise painful childhood memories, and even though the parent is gone and can't change, the person's entire sense of self and their relationship patterns change because the story they're carrying about where they come from has been rewritten. The most profound example I know is a woman who revised her relationship with her father, who died when she was 10. She'd spent 40 years believing he didn't love her because he was always distant and critical. And this belief had destroyed her self-worth and every romantic relationship she'd ever had. But she started revising specific memories, seeing her father's distance as his own pain rather than rejection of her, imagining moments where he showed love in small ways she'd overlooked. And, after 6 months of consistent revision, her whole life changed. Her marriage improved. Her relationship with her own children improved. Her career took off, all because she'd changed the foundational story about whether she was lovable. And that story came from revising her relationship with a man who'd been dead for 4 decades, which should be impossible. But revision doesn't care about what should be possible. It only cares about what you consistently imagine. One of the most powerful applications of revision is identifying patterns that keep repeating in your life and finding the original event that created the pattern, then revising that event to break the cycle. Because most patterns aren't just random bad luck. They're your subconscious recreating a familiar story based on an old memory. If you keep attracting the same type of toxic relationship, there's usually a template relationship from your past, often from childhood, that your subconscious is using as a blueprint. If you keep getting fired or quitting jobs right when things are going well, there's usually a past event where success led to some kind of pain or punishment, and your subconscious is protecting you from that happening again by sabotaging your success. If you keep struggling with money, no matter how much you make, there's usually a childhood memory tied to money and scarcity that's running the show. The pattern isn't the problem. The pattern is the symptom. The problem is the original event that created the template, and revision allows you to find that event and change it, which collapses the pattern. Here's how you identify these original events. You look at the pattern and ask yourself, when is the first time I remember feeling this way? When is the first time I experienced this type of situation? What does this remind me of from my past? And usually a specific memory will come to mind. And that's your target for revision. Let me give you my own example. For years, I had a pattern of self-sabotage. Every time I'd start to succeed at something, I'd find a way to blow it up. I'd quit. I'd pick a fight with a partner or boss. I'd make a stupid decision that destroyed what I'd built, and I couldn't figure out why. I consciously wanted success, but unconsciously, I was terrified of it. When I started digging into my past, I remembered an incident from when I was 12. I won a school competition, got recognized in front of the whole school, felt amazing for about an hour, then went home and my older brother beat me up out of jealousy, and my parents didn't protect me. They told me to stop showing off. And in that moment, I made an unconscious decision that success equals pain. Being recognized equals being hurt. And for the next 20 years, I'd been unconsciously avoiding success to protect myself from that pain. Once I identified that memory, I revised it. Every night I went back to that day, I saw myself winning the competition, coming home, my brother being happy for me, my parents being proud, everyone celebrating with me, feeling safe in my success. And I did this for probably 40 nights until I could barely remember what actually happened. The revised version felt more true, and within months the self-sabotage pattern completely disappeared. I started a business that succeeded beyond my expectations. I got into a healthy relationship and didn't run when it got serious. I made more money than I ever had and didn't find a way to lose it. And all because I'd revised a single event from when I was 12 that had been running my life for 2 decades. This is the power of combining pattern recognition with revision. You don't just try to change your behavior through willpower. You find the root memory creating the behavior, and you change that memory. And when the root changes, the whole tree changes. Every branch, every leaf, every fruit, all of it transforms because you transformed the source. And this is why revision is more powerful than any other self-help technique I've ever encountered. It doesn't work on the surface. It works at the foundation. And when the foundation shifts, everything built on it must shift too. Timing matters with revision, not in terms of when in your life you do it, but when during your day, and Neville was very specific about this. He said the best time to practice revision is right before falling asleep at night. And there's a reason for this that goes beyond just convenience. It has to do with brain states and subconscious receptivity. When you're lying in bed getting drowsy, you enter what's called the hypnagogic state, that twilight zone between waking and sleeping. And in this state, your conscious mind starts to shut down, your critical thinking relaxes, your defense mechanisms lower, and your subconscious becomes highly impressionable. Suggestions given to yourself in this state go directly into the subconscious without the filtering and resistance that happens when you're fully alert. And since revision is all about impressing a new memory onto your subconscious, doing it in this state makes it exponentially more effective than trying to do it in the middle of the day when your conscious mind is active and skeptical. The technique Neville recommended is simple, but requires discipline. As you're lying in bed, after you've done your normal bedtime routine, after you've turned off the lights and you're getting comfortable, don't just let yourself drift off to sleep. Instead, take a few deep breaths and consciously relax your body. Feel yourself getting heavy and relaxed, but keep your mind just alert enough to direct your imagination. You're looking for that state where you're deeply relaxed, but not quite asleep yet. And in that state, you begin your revision. You review your day backwards from the evening to the morning. And if anything happened during your day that you wish had gone differently, you revise it. You see it happening the way you wish it had, and you do this calmly, almost drowsily, without strain, just gently observing the revised version playing out in your imagination. And then you let yourself fall asleep with that revised version as the last thing in your mind. Because whatever's in your mind as you drift into sleep gets impressed deeply into your subconscious, and often becomes the subject of your dreams and the programming that runs the next day. I've been practicing bedtime revision for 3 years now, and it's transformed my life in ways both subtle and dramatic. Every single night before I sleep, I review my day, and if I had any conversations that went poorly, any moments where I felt fear or acted from a place I'm not proud of, any situations that left me feeling less than I want to feel, I revise them, I see them happening better, and the next day I notice I'm carrying less emotional baggage. I'm not replaying negative interactions in my head. I'm starting fresh. And over time, this practice has made me way less reactive, way more confident, way more at peace, because I'm not accumulating negative memories day after day. I'm cleaning them up every night. I'm refusing to carry today's problems into tomorrow. And this simple practice, which takes maybe 10 to 15 minutes before bed, has had a more profound impact on my mental health and life circumstances than years of therapy or meditation ever did. Because it's not just processing what happened, it's changing what happened in the only place that matters. In my consciousness, in my memory, in the story I'm telling myself about who I am and what my life is. And that story determines everything. Let me tell you the mistakes people make with revision that prevent it from working, because I see these all the time, and they're the reason someone will try this technique once or twice and give up saying it doesn't work, when really they just didn't do it correctly. Mistake number 1 is half-hearted imagination. People think about the revised version weakly. They imagine it while part of their mind is saying, "This is stupid, this isn't real," and that internal resistance kills the effectiveness. Your subconscious responds to the intensity and clarity of your imagination, not the fact that it happened or didn't happen in physical reality. So if you're imagining weakly, doubtfully, half-heartedly, you're not impressing anything on your subconscious. You're just wasting time. You have to imagine with full sensory vividness, seeing the details, hearing the sounds, feeling the emotions, making it so real in your mind that for those few moments you're giving your imagination, it feels more real than the memory of what actually happened. Mistake number 2 is trying to revise too many things at once. People want to fix their whole life in one session. They try to revise their childhood, their relationships, their career failures, their health issues, all at the same time. And this dilutes the power of the technique. Your subconscious needs focused repetition on one specific scene to accept it as a new memory. If you're jumping around revising 10 different things, you're not giving any single revision enough repetition to take root. The correct approach is to pick one specific event, one specific scene, and revise that same scene every single night for weeks until you can't remember the original version clearly, until the revised version is your dominant memory. Only then do you move on to revising something else. And I know that requires patience. You want instant transformation of everything, but that's not how the subconscious works. It's like building muscle. You don't try to work every muscle group in one session. You focus on one area. You work it consistently until it grows, then you move to the next area. Same principle with revision. Mistake number 3 is revising from a desperate emotional state. If you're in the middle of pain and you try to revise the event causing that pain while you're still emotionally charged, you'll have a hard time imagining it differently because your current emotion will color your imagination. You'll start imagining it better, but the negative emotion will creep in, and you'll end up just replaying the original version with slightly different details. And that doesn't help. You need to wait until you're calm, until you're in that relaxed state before sleep, and then you revise from a place of detachment. You're not trying to escape pain in the moment. You're calmly and systematically changing a memory so that it stops causing pain in the future. Mistake number 4 is giving up too soon. People will revise something 3 or 4 nights and say it's not working. I still remember the original version. I still feel bad. Well, yeah, because you've been reinforcing the original version for years or decades. You've thought about it hundreds or thousands of times, and you think 4 nights of revision is going to overwrite that. It takes time. It takes repetition. Neville said some revisions took him months of nightly practice before the new version became dominant. So if you want revision to work, you have to commit to it. You have to do it every single night without fail until you've impressed the new version so deeply that it becomes your truth. And there are no shortcuts to this. You either do the work or you don't get the results. But if you do the work correctly, the results are absolutely life-changing in ways you can't imagine until you experience them. The question everyone asks is, how do I know if this is working? How do I know I'm not just wasting my time imagining things that make no difference? And there are specific signs to look for that indicate your revision is taking hold and starting to change your reality. The first sign is that the emotional charge around the original memory starts to diminish. If you used to think about that event and feel intense pain, anger, shame, or fear, and now when you think about it, you feel less, you feel more neutral. That's evidence that the revision is working. Your subconscious is starting to accept the new version as true, and the old version is losing its power over you. And this usually happens gradually over days or weeks of consistent revision. One day, you'll notice you thought about the event and didn't feel that familiar punch in the gut. And that's your signal that something is shifting. The second sign is that you start to have trouble remembering the details of what actually happened. You'll try to recall the original event, and you'll find that the revised version comes to mind first, or you'll remember both versions, and you're not sure which one actually happened. Or you'll think about it and realize you can't access the original memory clearly anymore. It's become fuzzy or distant, while the revised version is vivid and present. And this might sound strange, but it's exactly what you want. It means your subconscious has accepted the revision as the memory, which means it's now operating from that revised past instead of the original one. The third sign is that your behavior in similar situations starts to change automatically without you trying. If you revised a memory where you felt humiliated and now you feel confident in the revision, you'll notice that in present-day situations where you used to feel that same humiliation, you now naturally feel more confident. You don't have to force it. It just happens because your subconscious is pulling from a different memory bank. And this is the real proof that revision works. Not just that you feel better about the past, but that your present automatically shifts to align with the new past you've created. The fourth sign, and this is the one that's hardest to explain but most profound to experience, is that sometimes external reality seems to shift in ways that reflect your revision. The person you revised a conversation with might reach out to you out of nowhere. An opportunity related to the revised event might appear. Circumstances might align in ways that seem to validate your revised version of the past. And I know this sounds like magical thinking, but I've experienced it and seen others experience it too many times to dismiss it as coincidence. Neville would say, it's not coincidence, it's law. When you change your inner reality, your outer reality must reflect it, because there is no outer reality separate from your consciousness. But even if you don't believe that, even if you think these external shifts are just confirmation bias or selective attention, it doesn't matter. What matters is your life improves, your emotional state improves, your relationships improve, your opportunities improve. And whether that's because you changed your vibration, or because you changed your perception, or because you literally changed, the timeline is less important than the fact that change happened because you chose to revise your past instead of staying imprisoned by it. And that's how you know it's working. Your life starts to work better, and that's the only metric that really matters. So now you know the truth that most people will never accept, that your past isn't fixed, that you have the power to change what happened through the deliberate use of imagination, that every night before you sleep, you can go back and rewrite the events that are keeping you stuck, and that if you do this consistently with full sensory vividness and emotional conviction, your present reality will shift to match the new past you've created. The question is, will you actually do this, or will you stay comfortable in your victim story? Will you keep replaying your traumas and failures and disappointments, or will you take responsibility for the fact that you're choosing to keep those memories alive, and you could just as easily choose to change them? Think about the event in your past that bothers you most, the one you replay constantly, the one that makes you cringe or hurt every time it comes to mind. What would your life look like? If that memory no longer had power over you, what would you be capable of if you weren't carrying that weight? Who would you become if that past was revised into something empowering instead of limiting? I want you to try this. Tonight, before you fall asleep, pick one specific event from your past that you wish had gone differently. Don't pick something huge and traumatic for your first attempt. Pick something manageable, a conversation that went wrong, a moment of embarrassment, a small failure. And as you're lying there getting drowsy, replay that event in your imagination, but see it happening the way you wish it had. See yourself handling it better. See others responding positively. See the outcome you wanted actually occurring and make it vivid. See the details, hear the sounds, feel the feelings of the revised version, and then fall asleep with that revision as the last thing in your mind. Do that every single night for 2 weeks. The same event, the same revision, 2 weeks of consistent practice, and I promise you'll notice something shift. Maybe the memory will lose its emotional charge. Maybe your behavior in similar situations will change. Maybe something external will shift in unexpected ways. But something will change because revision works. It's not theory, it's not philosophy. It's a practical technique that produces measurable results if you apply it correctly. Now drop a comment below and tell me what event you're going to revise. Be specific. Describe the situation and how you're going to imagine it differently, because putting it in writing increases your commitment. And I want to hold you accountable to actually doing this. And if you've tried revision before and got results, share your story in the comments so others can see that this isn't just abstract ideas. This is real transformation that real people experience when they take their power back from their past. Subscribe to this channel if you want more content on Neville Goddard, manifestation techniques that actually work, and the deeper spiritual laws that govern reality. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next video, where I'm going to teach you Neville's technique for revising your entire self-concept, not just individual events, but your whole identity, and how that creates transformation so total that you become literally a different person.